Growing up in the shadow of 9/11, I have known what it means to live with an undercurrent of suspicion in this city. I will always remember the disdain that I faced, the way that my name could immediately become Muhammad. To be Muslim in New York is to expect indignity. But indignity does not make us distinct. There are many New Yorkers who face it. It is the tolerance of that indignity that does.
That was Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York, standing outside a mosque this afternoon for an impassioned and at times emotional speech defending his Islamic faith. The 34-year-old frontrunner could be just 11 days away from becoming the city's first Muslim mayor. Mamdani's speech, coming after his opponent, Andrew Cuomo, has turned to stoking fears of Mamdani's faith and background in the final stretch of the campaign. Cuomo drawing criticism for this moment during an interview yesterday when he laughed at the suggestion that Mamdani would cheer for a terror attack.
People's lives are at stake. God forbid another 9/11. Can you imagine Mamdani in the seat?
Yeah, I could. He'd be cheering.
Well, it's another problem.
All right, my panel is back. Zohran, the moment there with Andrew Cuomo where he basically laughs when the host says that Mamdani would be cheering another 9/11 has been roundly criticized, of course. Seems to be what prompted Mamdani to give this speech. Mamdani has obviously been lauded for his, the way he's communicated. Some people have compared that moment to the race speech that President Obama gave during the 2008 campaign. How do you consider this?
I think you can look at the comments from other Democrats in New York and really a range of public officials that have condemned Andrew Cuomo's reaction, in that radio interview. You're seeing him face condemnation across the spectrum across the state. And when you look at Mamdani's speech and response, I think he's channeling a feeling that probably many New Yorkers of his generation have felt, which is facing xenophobic and Islamophobic attacks at that time. And he's taking this and trying to relate to them in that way. But for Cuomo here, I was talking to one political consultant who compared this moment to that moment when John McCain was at a rally. Somebody stood up, right, and made disparaging comments about Barack Obama, and you saw him
no ma'am, he said.
cut
no
the
ma'am.
person off, right?
Yeah.
Now compare that to this, where you have Andrew Cuomo giggling, at this comment as well. That's a stark difference.
Brad Todd, how do you look at the way Cuomo handled this and how Zohran Mamdani is handling it in turn?
Well, I think first off, Mamdani is a lot better communicator than Cuomo is, and you sort of sense that Cuomo is this politician from another era, which of course is a large part of his problem in this race. I think, however, the 9/11 is still an event that happened yesterday in New York, and it will always be an event that happened yesterday in New York. The 93 World Trade Center bombing, there's an unindicted co-conspirator who's been pictured with Mamdani. That picture's made the rounds this week. I think that probably started this roll of comments. I mean, he's obviously going to speak passionately, and his faith is important to him. I don't think most New Yorkers will begrudge that. They want people leaders whose faith is important to them. But I think that this is a classic example of trying to turn a real problem, an undercurrent that's a real problem, into a positive.
Let's take a look at how Cuomo responded to the backlash. So, of course, you heard what he said in that radio interview. There was backlash. Then Cuomo commented on the backlash. Let's watch that.
I didn't make that comment. I said about 9/11, that's another problem, referring to what I have said repeatedly, which is I have a problem with the fact that Zohran pals around with Hassan Piker, who said America deserved 9/11.
So, Lulu, I mean, of course, critics are saying that moment that he had in that interview, that Cuomo had in the interview, was Islamophobic. On the other hand, Zohran Mamdani has made, the phrase globalize the intifada has been an issue in his campaign, because that was something that he didn't disavow initially. And the point Cuomo trying to make there, that he has associates who have made comments like that one about 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, This is, though, I think, a fundamental problem when we're talking about Islam and people who are of Islamic faith. I do think they get judged with a double standard on the political sphere, and I think this is a perfect example of that. You know, Zohran Mamdani has had to answer repeatedly for comments that he might have made. Actually, in the case of Globalize the Intifada, he failed to condemn as opposed to embrace. That is a distinction, I think. And so what we're seeing here is him having to repeatedly talk about his faith, defend his faith, where he sits in the firmament in regards to issues like Israel and Palestine. And at the end of the day, he is way ahead of anyone that he is supposed to be running against. And you've seen Cuomo repeatedly try to make this an issue, pit him and his Muslim identity against Jewish New Yorkers. And the fact of the matter is that he is most likely going to be elected, and these particular attacks aren't landing. I think they're kind of despicable, and I don't think they're working. And beyond all of that, there is a political question which you can ask. Who do you hang around with? What does it mean? That's all legitimate political, kind of discourse. What I think Mamdani was speaking to in that particular speech, which was, I think, very effective, is, all right, but let me explain where I come from and where I sit in the world and how I stand there. And you can either embrace that or not embrace that, but to try and kind of create a religious conflict, which is what I see a lot of his adversaries doing, I think is falling pretty flat.
Aren't there some of these problems of his own making, though? Like as you point out, and you make the right distinction, that he refused to criticize the phrase globalize the Intifada, which is not the same as embracing it. But he also said that he had no opinion on Hamas's place in governing Gaza. I mean, New York is home to the second largest number of Jews anywhere but Israel. And so it's also a global city where the United Nations is. The New York mayor weighs in on these matters. And it seems to me like Mamdani, if he doesn't want to be dogged by this, then he should make very clear that he sides with the people of Israel against the terrorists. He sides with Jewish New Yorkers with their viewpoints in global affairs. And if he doesn't, is that not fair game?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to speak for him, but what I would probably say, and what he has said, is that his positions on Israel and Palestine are pretty clear, and that is distinct from his position over Jewish New Yorkers and how he would deal with that. And I think the conflation is part of the problem here, because you can have an opinion on what Israel is or is not doing, and that does not mean that you are anti-Semitic or that you are going to somehow hurt the interests of Jewish New Yorkers. And I think that is the distinction that he is trying to make. Now, you can, as a voter in New York, take that on board or not take that on board. I mean, but the continual emphasis that because of his religion, that somehow he is untrustworthy and cannot be embraced by people of the Jewish faith in New York, I think is continually going to be something that people are going to kind of look at and say, well, why is this equation being made?